Every night since I was very young, I've heard a light tapping on my window, just hard enough to wake me up, but it never took much for me to wake up. I've always been a pretty restless sleeper. Every night I would fall asleep, and every night around 1:30 I would wake up to the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I would wake up, slowly turn to the window, and then nothing. Complete and deafening silence. I never saw anything when I looked over to the window, just darkness. Occasionally, I would attempt to ignore the tapping, but every time I tried that, the tapping would become more frequent and louder. If I wanted any sleep, I had to look, so I would slowly turn, look at my window, and the tapping would stop. Whenever I tried to talk to my mom about it, she would always chalk it up to a tree branch tapping my window at night. The tree was never really close enough to my window to hit it unless there was a particularly strong wind or maybe a storm. I used to sleep over at my friend Corbin's house nearly every weekend. We hung out almost every day when we were in first grade. He was my best friend. Every day we were at each other's house, playing in seemingly never-ending woods that surrounded our houses. Corbin only lived about a 5-minute walk away from my house, so it was always very easy to see each other. The first time I slept over at Corbin's house, he said he never heard any tapping on his window and there were no trees nearby. However, every time I slept over at his house, both he and I would hear the taps on his window. Tap, tap, tap. Both of us woke up, looked at each other, and then at the window, and the tapping would stop. We brought it up to Corbin's parents as well, and they both said it was just the house settling. That made sense because Corbin lived in a 150-year-old farmhouse, so little creaks and taps weren't super uncommon. But the sound of something tapping on a window was very strange to me. I now know that the tapping was neither a tree, nor was it the old house settling. One day when Corbin and I were sleeping over at my house, we decided that we were going to set a camera outside in an attempt to see what branch was hitting my window. We begged and begged my mom to buy us a camera, and she finally gave in. She took us to Walmart and bought us the cheapest camera that could record video that she could find. We brought it home, and she helped us set it up and put it up in the tree facing my window. Despite our excitement, we understood that we needed to leave it be to not scare away anything that we might see. After eating our normal meal of dino nuggets and baked french fries down in the obscene amount of ketchup, we went upstairs and went to bed. We were feeling as if we were trying to catch Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. As always, later that night we heard the tapping. Unlike every other time, though, we heard a huge amount of rustling, making us worry that maybe the wind had knocked the camera out of the tree. It was particularly windy that day. The taps that night were more aggressive than what they had been previously. They were more of a rhythmic thud against my window rather than a gentle tap. Obviously startled by the new aggressive knocks, we woke up, turned towards the window, and the knocking stopped. We brushed it off and went back to bed. When we woke up the following morning, we were so excited to check the footage from the camera that we skipped breakfast and didn't even brush our teeth until later in the morning. We woke up my mom, and she grumbled and groaned her way downstairs, threw her shoes on, and we went outside. We went to the tree and noticed that the camera wasn't where we had set it the day before. It wasn't anywhere to be found. Instead, in its place was a piece of paper that had a hand-drawn picture on it. It was one little stick figure being hugged by a huge, shadowy being. Underneath one of the stick figures were my initials as well as a heart underneath the big stick figure. The bottom of the paper said, "With love, my child." The paper also had a flash drive taped to the back. We gave the paper to my mother and her face turned a ghost white. It looked like all the blood had drained from her face. She told us to get inside and that she needed to make a phone call. She called the police. When they got there, they asked me a few questions. I can't remember what they asked, and really, they only talked to Corbin and me for a few minutes. I remember feeling guilty and scared when I saw my mother crying. There's something especially terrifying when you see your parents cry. It makes things seem much more real and serious. But still, as a 5-year-old at the time, I couldn't understand the danger that presented itself that day. All these years later, I finally know what was on that flash drive. It was filled with hundreds of videos of me, taken when the taps would happen in the middle of the night. Hundreds of videos and pictures of me waking up. There was one file that was a little bit different. It was from the camera we lost that night. It was a video of my window, exactly where we had rested it so many years ago. When you skim through the video, you see a hand slowly creep up and cover the lens of the camera. The hand was dirty, like this person had been digging holes in the ground barehanded, and then darkness. I can't remember much after that, or if any of the other strange events of my childhood have any connection to it. But if I remember anything else, I will update later. As of right now, it's time for me to go to bed. It's 12:57, and I don't want to miss my old friend. If you haven't read my first, Windows, please go read it before reading Lawns. My first post is pertinent to understanding the events in this post. I recently remembered something that disturbs me deeply. This truly shook me to my core, and my outlook on my life has changed drastically because of this. As a teenager, you tend to think that you are completely invincible, nothing can ever hurt you. This is not true. Going into my sophomore year of high school, I went on a backpacking trip with a few friends and was feeling a little brave. I decided that I was going to jump across some large rocks. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. My foot got caught in one of the cracks in the rock. I broke my ankle and smacked my head against the hard rock, leaving me concussed and in immense pain. I now have a permanent dent in my head, scarring on my foot, a crooked nose, and some missing teeth. I had to get airlifted to the closest hospital, and the rest of the trip was canceled. I found out at the hospital that I'd also broken my leg and torn my anterior talofibular ligament due to my broken ankle. The pain was horrible. I went into that school year in a wheelchair, a cast on my leg and foot, and multiple bandages that needed to be changed several times throughout the day. It was absolutely embarrassing. I have never been the scholarly type. The year of my injuries, I was entering my second sophomore year. I failed everything miserably the year prior and got held back. I never had a grade higher than a D. Due to this fact, I was bullied relentlessly by nearly everyone around me. My friends abandoned me, my brother made fun of me, and my mother constantly expressed her disappointment in me. It was a horrible year for me that year. I was on the verge of suicide for most of that year. I only remember one assignment from that year. It was the last assignment of the year, meaning that there was no way that this was going to push me over the edge for that class. It was a business class. We were required to make up and try to execute a business plan. Corbin and I decided we wanted to mow lawns. We designed our flyers equipped with pictures of both of us, all our gear, and phones. Corbin had a phone. We put that flyer everywhere. We put it in the mailbox, every possible pole, and handed it to any pedestrian that dare walk on our side of the street. The phone calls and text messages until mid-July, when we got a message from a man who wanted his lawn mowed and the edges trimmed. He scheduled us for July 17th at 6:30 p.m. On the day of his lawn appointment, we got to the house and things seemed normal at first. It was an average house with an average front and backyard and an average garage. Everything about this house seemed normal. There were far more security cameras than what we had ever seen before. We just chalked it up to the homeowners being anxious about robberies or something like that. We didn't live in the safest neighborhood ever. There was a note left on the door. It read, "Thank you for mowing my lawn. Behind this envelope is the cash to pay you. Please collect and mow my lawn." My phone number is censored because I can't seem to remember the number. Thanks again. I'm most likely inside if anything is needed. The paper was rather dirty, as if whoever wrote it had been doing some yard work or something right before they wrote it. There were dirty handprints all over the garden started working. It was rather late when we started our work. We didn't get there until about 6 o'clock, so until around 6:30. While the grass was thicker than we had anticipated, and our mower was nearly 10 years old, and our floundering business had not yet made enough money to buy a new one. We were trying to know, and I began to notice a flashing light coming from the windows of the house. I didn't think anything of it. The house was watching TV, and maybe they were turning on and shutting off lights or something. I heard until my ankle got starting to hurt. The seat and Corbin finished the we got home around 9 one night. We decided that Corbin was going to spend the night at my house. We split our earnings and got ready for bed. We each made $20 that day. I spread my previous bills so you understand. Something constantly taps at my window in the middle of the night. It persists until I wake up to look at the window. That night was weird. We went to sleep and the inevitable taps had started. Rather than there being nothing there, that night there was a piece of paper taped to my window. I got up, walked over to the window, and grabbed the paper off of it. It was a picture of Corbin and I while we were working on that lawn. It was printed on a piece of paper part around me. Corbin had been crossed out on the paper. The paper had many dirty prints all over it. I looked around outside but saw nothing. All I heard was some crunching and the sound of a camera taking a picture. My phone was blowing up. I checked my messages and saw dozens of messages from the client earlier saying things like, "Soon you will love me as I love you," followed by dozens of pictures of me working, always with a heart around me, and Corbin being crossed out. I woke Corbin up and we ran to my mom's room, woke her up, showed her the pictures, and immediately left the house. We spent the night at Corbin's house and lived in several different hotels in the next several months. That night, my mom called the police, and while they couldn't help me, it was at least a bit comforting. A nice false sense. I don't remember right now. My mother is getting irritated with all my questions, but I feel that I deserve to know all the facts of what happened during my childhood. It's starting to drive me insane. There is so much mystery in my mind that I don't understand. I will write again once I'm able to pry more information out of my mother, but for now, that's all I have. I'm looking through all the pictures again, starting to feel sick enough to do this to a person who's so torture.